Listen, this feels like a dream or a Hollywood movie. Matter of fact, it's probably some Hollywood writer out there banging out a script right now. Like, these NASA astronauts stuck in space, awaiting some type of way to get back, is just mind-blowing.
All right, we want to take you live now to Houston, where NASA is providing an update on the astronauts that are stuck in space. Let's listen in now.
And our crewed access to the space station. This whole discussion, remember, is put in the context of we have had mistakes done in the past. We lost 2 space shuttles as a result of there not being a culture in which information could come forward. We have been very solicitous of all of our employees that if you have...
It's not the time for big words, bro. I'm gonna have to look that one up when this one is over. Solicitous? Yeah, it's not the time for that, bro. Be direct and understanding, easy to understand.
Some objection, you come forward. Space flight is risky, even at its safest, and even at its most routine. And a test flight by nature is neither safe nor routine. And so the decision to keep Butch and Sonny aboard the International Space Station and bring the Boeing Starliner home uncrewed is a result of a commitment to safety. Our core value is safety, and it is our North Star. And I'm grateful to NASA and to Boeing for their teams, for all the incredible and detailed work to get to this decision. Turn it over to Jim.
Thank you, sir. Thank you and Deputy Administrator Melroy for your support along the way, and certainly for being here today. It means a lot. I'd like to communicate to all of you that we've come to this decision using our program, our mission directorate, and our agency level processes. That includes the decisions that happen at the commercial crew program, at the space operations mission directorate level, and the agency level, and includes all of our technical authorities from engineering, safety, medical, and flight operations. As the administrator said, our focus is on safety all the time, and this certainly is no different. The uncertainty in our margins is where we have come to make the decision that the administrator laid out. That uncertainty remains in our understanding of the physics going on in the thrusters, and we still have some work to go. You'll hear more from others on the specifics, but I'll tell you that the NASA and Boeing team have made incredible technical progress in the model development that has gone on, the thruster testing, understanding material properties within the valve, and the complicated fluid physics that are happening inside. We will continue to learn. We are a learning organization, and I think we've demonstrated that here. We'll learn from this effort so that our crews, who are at the top of the pyramid on these missions, and their families can continue to know we've done that and we'll always do our best. For our team, our programmatic and technical teams, both NASA and the Commercial Crew Program and the Space Station Program, and our Boeing teammates have worked endlessly to get to launch, and certainly in the past 2 months. They've done this while the whole world has gone on around them. A hurricane through Florida, a hurricane through here, while their homes are damaged and without power, they came to work. Some of them lost family members along the way. Their kids went back to school and life in general went on, but they were here every day working long hours. They have persevered, and I want them to know how grateful I am that they are on our team. This has not been an easy decision, but it is absolutely the right one. Let me turn it over to Ken Bowersox and thank Ken and all the leaders here and the ones that are not here with us today for their work.
Thanks, Jim, and thanks to you and the administrator for joining us for this press conference and for our meeting. So you guys have been heavily involved, and we appreciate that. I also want to thank everybody who's here in the room with us and watching online. It says a lot that you're with us on a Saturday, and I want you to know how much we appreciate your support as we work to fly our mission safely. I'm really proud of the NASA team and the Boeing team for all the work they've been doing the last couple of months. It's really been impressive to see how they've been very agile in testing, gathering data, and completing analysis. And then having the tough discussions that go along with processing that data and coming to conclusions. Our intent today was to have the first part of a flight readiness review. The goal of that review was to come up with a NASA recommendation on whether we should proceed with the crewed flight test, either crewed or uncrewed. Our Boeing partners told us that they would be able to execute either option, and they thought that the call belonged to NASA because of our wider view of all the risks involved. We conducted a poll. All of the organizations on the polling sheet indicated that they thought we should proceed uncrewed with the flight test. And so our next step will be to process toward that uncrewed flight test. To finish those preparations, and we'll have another part 2 of the readiness review Wednesday or Thursday next week, we believe, to make sure that we're ready for undock and to complete the test. We are still in the middle of a test flight. We have to remain vigilant. We need to get the vehicle back on deck, go through the data, and once we've done that, we'll start thinking about our next steps for Starliner's next flight. And now I'd like to pass the mic to Steve to share more info and more details.
Thanks, Ken, and thanks for the kind words. I want to thank all of you for being here, and the public and everybody for following our progress over the summer. It's been a long summer. It's been a long summer for our team, and I want to first start out by thanking our team who's worked so hard over the summer, long hours, weekends, nights, testing, analysis, reviews. I mean, it has just been an incredible effort by the team. We are dealing with a very complex issue with the thrusters, and I'll talk more about that, but it's challenging to predict their performance. It's challenging to predict the temperatures we'll see. And so that's why it's been tough, and it's taken the time ever since we docked back on June 6th to get to this point. Very proud of the due diligence that the team has displayed, their perseverance, their fortitude, courage, dedication, resilience as they learned more and we got more data and different results at times than we expected. I especially want to thank the Boeing team and their contractor team, Aerojet Rocketdyne, the engine manufacturer, the valve manufacturer, Moog, all their suppliers that participated, along with the NASA workforce. We have brought in expertise from just about every NASA center. We did testing at the Marshall Space Flight Center. Of course, our White Sands test facility did testing on the thrusters. So this has been a huge effort across all of NASA within the commercial crew program and even beyond. Determining the position to bring Starliner back uncrewed was very difficult for me personally. We're all committed to the mission, which we started out, which is to bring Butch and Sunny back. But as we got more and more data over the summer and understood the uncertainty of that data, it became very clear to us that the best course of action was to return Starliner uncrewed. And I'll talk about the other aspects of the mission in a little bit.
Imagine the domino effect this is going to have on the next space mission, whether it be SpaceX or any other one, NASA, Boeing, Starliner, whatever one. Imagine the domino effect. You probably had, and the crazy part about this is I'm just playing like the recent events that happened. We had the whole submersible incident that took place. Now, granted, these two didn't lose their lives, but it's still like I'm going up here, supposed to be back in, 8 days, and now I'm sitting here Now they're saying February. And my life is ultimately in the hands of these people of bringing me back. Like, imagine your life relies on other people to make sure you get back home safely. Like, I can only imagine their mental right now. What mental space they're in, no pun intended. Like, I could only imagine, man. I know my family would be freaking out. My kids, my wife, they'd be freaking out right now. And I'm trying to hold it together, remain positive, while every day trying to work back and forth and figure out, am I gonna return home safe? This is crazy.
The bottom line relative to bringing Starliner back is there was just too much uncertainty in the prediction of the thrusters. If we had a model, if we had a way to accurately predict what the thrusters would do for the undock and all the way through the deorbit burn and through the separation sequence, I think we would have taken a different course of action. But when we looked at the data and looked at the potential for thruster failures with a crew on board, and then getting into this very tight sequence of finishing the deorbit burn, which puts the vehicle on an entry, and then immediately maneuvering from that into a SEP sequence to separate the service module and crew module, it was just too much risk with the crew, and so we decided to pursue the uncrewed test flight. The path forward now is to, as Ken said, work toward the Flight Readiness Review Part 2. Well, we review now. We know the scope of the mission. We know it's an uncrewed test flight. We are changing the separation sequence that we planned, and we will review those aspects at the readiness review. We're going to go with a simplified separation technique to get away from station a little more quickly. We'll get to the deorbit burn and execute that nominally. We have a good setup in terms of the opportunities into the White Sands Space Harbor for a number of opportunities in September. We'll land or undock in early September, and then we have a lot of work to do relative to the rest of the mission, which is Bush and Sunny stay on the space station for some time, and they return on Crew 9. We're configuring that spacecraft with a couple extra, 2 different seats. So we'll have 2 different crew members, 2 crew members on that vehicle, and then we'll have it ready to bring Butch and Sunny home. So they'll be ballast in 2 seats on the uphill. We also have to work to reconfigure the Crew 8 vehicle. When Starliner undocks, it will undock first, and then the Crew 8 vehicle will serve as the lifeboat for Butch and Sunny. We have a configuration on the cargo pallet we'll go put in place. So again, we'll get Calypso home when we're ready to do so. We're going to take our time taking the steps, each step along the way. We'll have an important simulation ahead of that flight readiness review with the flight control team. You know, if you put yourself in their place, they have practiced for 2 years to bring a crew home on Starliner. There are some differences in executing the undock sequence and the coast to the deorbit burn and the deorbit burn without a crew, and so they're going to practice that next week. I'm extremely grateful for the commercial crew program, the entire team. It's an honor to represent them here today, and I'll turn it over to Dana Weigel.
Tonight, NASA has finally revealed how it plans to pull off its newest mission, getting 2 astronauts back to Earth.
Bush and Sunny stay on the space station for some time, and they return on Crew 9. We're configuring that spacecraft with a couple extra 2 different seats. So we'll have 2 different crew members, 2 crew members on that vehicle, and then we'll have it ready to bring Butch and Sunny home. So they'll be ballast in 2 seats on the uphill.
After being stranded in space for over 3 months, Starliner's astronaut crew Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore finally have a return date for their 8-day mission. NASA recently announced that the duo will return home with SpaceX's Crew 9 next February, and Starliner will return uncrewed. The mission, originally planned as an 8-day trip to the International Space Station, has now stretched to 9 months, making the prospect of returning on SpaceX next year appear to be the safer choice for NASA astronauts.
Being Starliner back uncrewed was very difficult for me personally. We're all committed to the mission, which we started out, which is to bring Butch and Sunny back, but as we got more and more data over the summer,
this development is a significant blow to Boeing's Starliner, which has continually been outperformed by Elon Musk's SpaceX. It also suggests that NASA is increasingly losing confidence in Boeing's ability to reliably transport astronauts to and from the ISS.
And I was thinking about that when he was making his statements. One of the gentlemen, I don't remember their names, I just saw them for the first time. But when they were making their statements and they spoke about Boeing, I was like, does he really mean that, or is he just saying that? With everything that's been happening, and this is all public information, I'm not saying nothing out the way, but with everything that has been happening with Boeing and them being in the news for different things, and now this, I didn't think the company could take another negative press release. So now to have this added on, I'm like, Boeing has like a uphill battle as a company, I think.
The Boeing Starliner blasted into space on 5 June 2024 from Florida's Cape Canaveral Space Force Station after 2 unsuccessful launches on 6th May and 1st June. But what was supposed to be an 8-day trip to the ISS and back turned into a 3-month-long survival challenge for Sunita Williams and Barry Wilmore, thanks to 5 helium leaks, 5 malfunctioning maneuvering thrusters, and a slow-moving propellant valve in the Boeing capsule. Their fate had been hanging in the balance for too long, while NASA tried to decide how to bring the 2 back home. Finally, the decision is made, and the 2 stranded astronauts can return to Earth. The space agency announced on Saturday, August 24th, that Sunita Williams and Butch Wilmore will return next February, outlining their plan on how to return Starliner's astronauts' crew to Earth.
David, this is one of the most consequential safety decisions for NASA in a generation. To bring home these 2 astronauts, the space agency will now look past Boeing Starliner to Boeing's competitor, SpaceX.
NASA has decided that Butch and Sonny will return with Crew 9 next.
At last, NASA chose Elon Musk's SpaceX for the astronauts' return after a long deliberation. Boeing Starliner will return to Earth uncrewed to avoid any fatal losses. The spacecraft is like a loose cannon right now. You just don't know what will happen next. This update on Boeing's first crewed Starliner test flight comes as Sunita and Butch near the 80-day mark of what was initially an 8-day mission. NASA and Boeing collected data from 2 areas, space and ground operations, on the Starliner spacecraft's propulsion and helium systems to better assess the severity of the technical challenges. The review included a mission status update, a review of technical data and closeout actions, as well as certify flight rationale to process undocking and return from the space station. The formal review was necessary to ensure the safety of both astronauts who agreed to participate in Starliner's first crewed test flight. It was finally decided that a SpaceX Crew Dragon capsule would bring the NASA astronauts back after their unfortunate stint with Boeing's Starliner capsule.
Now say what you want about Elon, and however you felt about him in the past, and whatever negative comments you got to say about him. Now this is a time where you should be praising him, everything that he's been doing and that company has been doing and the workers have been doing with SpaceX. Because now they can step in and save these 2. Bring them back home safely. Like, I don't care how you feel, but everything he's been working up, look where it's led to, an opportunity for him to step in and help out and assist. Salute to Elon.
Neither team could resolve the technical issues aboard Starliner. It could not pass the safety check. Hence, the Starliner spacecraft will return to Earth uncrewed after an unsuccessful test flight.
We have had mistakes done in the past. We lost 2 space shuttles as a result of there not being a culture.
Interestingly, this news comes as no surprise because Ken Bowersox, NASA's director of space operations, told reporters last week that the chances of an uncrewed Starliner return have increased significantly, considering what has happened in the earlier weeks. He confessed, "That's why we're looking more closely at that option to make sure that we can handle it." Interestingly, NASA and Boeing officials were aware of a helium leak, but didn't think it would pose a safety risk to the spacecraft. It's safe to say their assessment was entirely off, just like it was wrong 50 years ago when NASA launched Apollo 13 with a damaged liquid oxygen tank on board. As soon as Starliner failed its test, NASA found itself at a crossroads, weighing several options but still uncertain about the best path forward. One scenario under consideration was scaling back the upcoming ISS launch, SpaceX's Crew 9, from 4 astronauts to 2. This change would create space for Williams and Wilmore when Crew Dragon returns to Earth in 2025. In fact, the launch was pushed back 5 weeks to September 24th to keep this possibility on the table. Looking at NASA's final decision, it was definitely a good call to delay the Crew 9 launch. Another option involved squeezing the Starliner astronauts into the tight space beneath Crew 8's Dragon seats and joining joining the current ISS crew on their ride home. While it sounds risky, it wouldn't be the first time NASA has considered adding extra passengers during a mission. Crew Dragon, after all, was initially designed to carry more than 4 people, 7 in fact, according to a 2014 version of the spacecraft. However, in 2019, NASA requested the seating capacity be reduced to 4 due to concerns about the G-forces astronauts would endure during landing, driven by the spacecraft's installation angle. For some time now, NASA has been exploring various possibilities, with more spacecraft docking at the ISS than ever before. The agency hopes to bring people up and down in different ways than the craft they originally arrived in, seeking flexibility in an increasingly complex orbital environment. This idea took root in late 2022, when a docked Soyuz spacecraft sprung a coolant leak, crippling its ability to come home with astronauts on board. Fortunately, a backup was ready at the time in the form of a Crew Dragon. The initial plan for the astronauts' return on SpaceX Crew 9 was that NASA would launch 2 astronauts on the spacecraft with a metallic ballast in the remaining 2 seats. The ballast would be designed to have a similar center of gravity as a pair of astronauts. When Crew 9 is ready to return home in February 2025, the ballast for Williams and Wilmore will be removed. If NASA had chosen Crew 8 as their return ride, the spacecraft would have ventured back with its 4 astronauts and up to 3 crew members aboard its cargo pallet. 2 seats would have been reserved for Williams and Wilmore, while the third may have been taken by NASA astronaut Tracy Dyson, who flew to the ISS on a Soyuz this past March. However, the space agency was confident that Dyson would return home on the Soyuz as planned, but it was keeping all options open in case of an emergency. Believe it or not, the NASA Boeing mission launched was doomed from the beginning. The astronauts aboard the Boeing spacecraft faced one challenge after another, starting with malfunctioning reaction control thrusters and troublesome helium leaks. As they journeyed toward the International Space Station, what began as a few technical issues quickly snowballed into a series of critical problems. During Starliner's 25-hour flight, engineers on the ground discovered not 1 but 4 additional helium leaks, and to make matters worse, 5 of the spacecraft's 27 thrusters were also found to be faulty, all within the service module.
Main kind of buckets of problems that came up during Starliner's flight to the International Space Station. One relates to thrusters that are used to maneuver the spacecraft. A handful of them temporarily failed as the vehicle was docking, with the space station. And then the second bucket of problems are helium leaks.
Despite these daunting obstacles, the spacecraft and its 2 brave passengers docked safely at the ISS.
Yeah, because most of the NASA astronauts in general, they're trained to be able to troubleshoot and problem solve. You know what I mean? They spend tons and tons of time training for different things that happen. So it's not like that's not in the back of their mind. If something happened, okay, we need to do this. This is the protocol for this. We need to handle this way and do that. That's not the thing. You know what I mean? It's just, man, a barrage. And then when you can't fix something, then that's when the problem ensues. And it's like, oh, we have a huge and serious problem now. We cannot fix this. And then ultimately to say, okay, we can't go back.
However, the mission, which initially planned to return the astronauts to Earth in just 8 days, took a drastic turn. The relentless barrage of malfunctions forced the crew to extend their stay at the space station, turning what was meant to be a short stint into an over a months-long ordeal.
More technical problems disrupted the flight.
There are 2 main kind of buckets of problems that came up during Starliner's flight to the International Space Station. One,
and while Sunita and Barry's destiny was teetering on the edge, NASA officials continued to insist the 2 astronauts were not stranded in space. That's quite a statement considering that the space agency ignored a helium leak in the spacecraft before launch and the high-profile malfunctions of Boeing's planes in recent years. More and more whistleblowers are pointing fingers at Boeing and NASA managers attached to this mission.
We've got breaking news for you this morning. A current Boeing employee is accusing the airplane manufacturer of cutting corners. This latest whistleblower came forward hours before Boeing CEO Dave Calhoun will be grilled on Capitol Hill today. And there, of course, are growing questions over the safety of Boeing's aircraft, which is why.
That's what I was saying, bro. They couldn't afford another negative headline, I don't think. The last time I looked at the stock price, it just was constantly falling. So I was like, yo, they need some good press. After that whistleblower was killed or whatever happened to him, I don't remember what happened, what they said, what was the outcome from the autopsy But he was a whistleblower that turned up dead. So, like, come on.
Whistleblowers claim that officials were well aware of multiple issues with the spacecraft, but still chose to proceed because they thought the problems were too minor to delay the mission. Nobody would have doubted the space agency's intentions if the Boeing capsule had returned home without a stitch, but considering the issues that were deemed too minor have taken a major turn, leaving 2 decorated astronauts stranded in space, it's impossible to ignore how incorrect NASA's assessment was. And if NASA's failing safety standards weren't bad enough, Boeing's reputation only makes matters worse. Although the giant aerospace was once known for building the safest, most advanced planes in the sky, the terrible 737 MAX crashes of 2018 and 2019, which killed 346 people, have raised serious questions about the company's quality and safety standards. And now they can add another craft to their list of failures. Boeing is one of the largest manufacturers of commercial jetliners, military aircraft, satellites, and other defense and space equipment. However, the company has been the center of several controversies over the years, primarily due to issues related to safety, management decisions, and ethical concerns. The most significant and well-known controversy surrounding Boeing is the series of crashes involving the Boeing 737 MAX aircraft. 2 fatal crashes, Lion Air Flight 610 in October 2018 and Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 in March 2019, resulted in the deaths of 346 people. Investigations revealed a faulty automated flight control system. The Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System, MCAS, was a major contributing factor. The crashes led to a worldwide grounding of the 737 MAX fleet for over a year and raised serious questions about Boeing's safety practices, regulatory oversight, and the pressure to compete with Airbus. Boeing has also been under fire for its quality control standards when it comes to manufacturing plants. The nation was shocked by reports of safety lapses, such as debris being left inside aircraft during assembly, and concerns about the working conditions at its facilities, particularly in South Carolina, where the 787 Dreamliner is produced. These revealed secrets raised concerns about whether the company has prioritized speed and cost savings over safety and quality.
And is you worked on both the 787 and the 7777, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you identified major safety concerns with both of these lines.
Yes, sir.
And you identified these to your superiors.
Yes, sir. I have written many memos time after time that we can provide.
Over a period of years, I think.
Yeah, this is like 3 years. For the 787, it's been 3 years of effort.
And so
In addition, Boeing's handling of the 737 MAX crisis exposed deep flaws in the company's corporate culture, including allegations that it cared more about the bottom line than passenger safety. Boeing
And the crazy thing about it is we only hear about it after something happens. That's the only time we get to hear about it, but yet people's lives are at stake and they're actively using these planes and different things like that. So why that's not fair to the people. That's totally not fair. Like, they're putting their lives in your hands. Like, any safety concern should be made public. The public should be well aware.
Boeing's leadership has been criticized, particularly under former CEO Dennis Muhlenberg, who was accused of downplaying the severity of the MAX crisis and mishandling the company's response. Another troubling issue is Boeing's close relationship with the Federal Aviation Administration, FAA. It was revealed that Boeing had a significant influence on the 737 MAX's certification process, which makes one wonder if the FAA was too lenient in its inspection. Boeing has also been involved in various ethical controversies, including allegations of corruption and fraud. For instance, in the early 2000s, Boeing was involved in a major procurement scandal that led to the imprisonment of its CFO and a Pentagon official for unethical conduct related to a military tanker contract. All we can say is that Boeing has really deep pockets and strong connections, which not only helped the company remain afloat despite controversies, but also won the NASA spacecraft contract. But why did NASA choose Boeing? You see, NASA primarily relied on the space shuttle and later the Russian Soyuz spacecraft for crew transportation to and from the ISS. When the space shuttle retired in 2011, Soyuz was the only ride to and from the International Space Station until 2020. But NASA needed to have a backup, so the space agency funded the development of Crew Dragon and Starliner, hoping to bring crewed orbital spaceflight capabilities back to U.S. soil. Hence, NASA awarded Boeing the contract for the Starliner spacecraft as part of the Commercial Crew Program, CCP, aiming to develop private sector spacecraft capable of carrying astronauts to and from the International Space Station, ISS. There were quite a few reasons why NASA chose Boeing for this program. First and foremost, Boeing is one of the world's largest and most experienced aerospace companies, with a long history of collaboration with NASA. The company's leading expertise in designing, manufacturing, and operating spacecraft, including its significant role in developing the Space Shuttle and various ISS components, made it a strong contender for the Commercial Crew Program. In addition, Boeing has been a longtime partner of NASA and has contributed to multiple space missions and projects. For this reason, NASA was confident in Boeing's ability to take up another challenge and deliver on the critical project. Boeing had broad capabilities in aerospace engineering, manufacturing, and systems integration, as well as the resources, facilities, and technical expertise required to develop a new spacecraft like the CST-100 Starliner. The whole purpose behind NASA's Commercial Crew Program was to foster competition between private companies so the space agency wouldn't have to rely on a single carrier. Boeing and SpaceX both were awarded NASA contracts to drive innovation, reduce costs, and improve safety. Despite the later controversies at the time of the contract award, Boeing's commitment to safety and human spaceflight was a significant factor. NASA believed that Boeing had the experience and processes in place to develop a safe and effective crew transportation system. But even though Boeing and SpaceX began developing their spacecraft at the same time, both companies had very different experiences in terms of success and failure. No matter how hard Boeing tried, it always stayed one step behind Elon Musk's SpaceX. Starliner was unable to dock with the ISS during its initial uncrewed test flight, orbital flight test, in late 2019. On the other hand, SpaceX successfully carried out its first uncrewed flight, Demo 1, earlier that same year. Although Starliner eventually docked with the ISS during Orbital Flight Test 2 in 2022, the project encountered additional setbacks, including problems with the landing parachute and flammable wiring tape. Unfortunately, things only worsened for Boeing from that point onward. Starliner's first crewed liftoff was scrubbed just 2 hours before launch, as engineers spotted a faulty valve on the Atlas V rocket. It was rescheduled to May 17th, but that didn't work out either. Engineers noted a small helium leak this time, pushing the launch to June 1st. However, minutes before the planned takeoff, the crew identified a power issue with the ground equipment, delaying the flight once more. Finally, on June 5th, the capsule nicknamed Calypso was launched into space. The spacecraft, in addition to being a year behind schedule, was also $1.5 billion over budget. If you compare this with SpaceX, as of August 2024, the company has completed numerous missions to the ISS using both its Crew Dragon and Cargo Dragon spacecraft. When you combine both crewed and cargo missions, SpaceX has flown to the ISS over 40 times so far. On the other hand, this was Boeing's first crewed mission, leaving 2 astronauts stranded on the ISS. Starliner was meant to be Boeing's comeback story, a chance to prove that even if its planes had issues, it could still launch humans into space and bring them safely back to Earth. But the events that occurred after the Starliner launch painted an entirely different picture. When the long-delayed over-budget spacecraft finally lifted off from Florida in June, it seemed for a moment that Boeing might finally catch a break. The brief euphoria, however, vanished as quickly as a shooting star. Technical glitches with the pioneering spacecraft and sensationalized headlines soon spiraled the situation out of control, and Boeing found themselves losing their grip on the Starliner narrative. Some argue that this was more a communication failure than a reflection of any major flaws with Starliner. After all, like many experimental spacecraft before it, Apollo rockets, the Space Shuttle, and even Elon Musk's Starship, Starliner was simply facing the typical hurdles of early development. Yet a lingering unease remained. From the start, media briefings were few and far between, leading some reporters to suspect that Boeing and NASA were downplaying the technical problems or the potential length of the astronauts' stay, originally projected to be just 8 to 10 days. The uncertainty certainty only fueled the growing sense of doubt surrounding the mission. Mark Nappy, Boeing's commercial crew program manager, even confessed, saying, "We would not have been so emphatic about it being an 8-day mission. It's my regret that we didn't just say we're going to stay up there until we get everything done that we want to go do." If Boeing officials hadn't given a strict timeline for their test flight, they could have gotten away with unexpected mission delays. But if you think about it, a clear timeline was important, as Starliner's first crewed mission was already behind schedule and over budget. By setting a return...
That whole statement bothers me. It bothers me. You wish you wouldn't have said this that way. It would have never looked negatively on the company, instead of what happened and we're working to get... Like, address the problem, deal with the problem, but you're so worried about the effect and everything else. See, that just shows to me, that says a lot. That says a lot. And it also says, no wonder we're here with that type of mindset and thinking.
That Boeing hoped to win back some confidence in the company. Unfortunately, that plan backfired, and both Boeing and NASA found themselves in the middle of a media frenzy. The company's reputation and recent lawsuits didn't help their case either. On July 7, 2024, Boeing agreed to plead guilty to a criminal fraud conspiracy charge and pay a fine of $243.6 million to resolve a U.S. Justice Department investigation into 2 737 MAX fatal crashes.
And a corporation pleads guilty to a charge of criminal fraud. It's a lot different than when a human pleads guilty to corporate fraud or any other kind of fraud. In reality, in many ways, when corporations plead guilty or are found guilty...
Look at the stock. What I told y'all. Look at the stock. And that was just like on a day. Seeing a stock drop from like 192 to around 182-ish, like that. Look at that steep drop. Like, and they're only showing it on a day-to-day basis. If they zoomed out to maybe like a yearly, you would see.
Guilty in federal court, it looks a lot more like an accelerated civil case with the government as a plaintiff rather than the victims themselves.
The plea deal, which requires a judge's approval, would brand the plane maker a convicted felon in connection with crashes in Indonesia and Ethiopia over a 5-month period in 2018 and 2019 that killed 346 people. The victims' families weren't happy with the settlement and hoped Boeing would face a trial and suffer harsher financial consequences. This recent guilty plea will eventually make it difficult for the company to secure lucrative government contracts with the likes of the U.S. Defense Department and NASA.
About what happens to the Starliner program.
You know, this might not look good right now, but we don't know the end of it yet.
The Starliner's failure might just become the final nail in the coffin for the Boeing and NASA collaboration. Do you agree? Will NASA continue its contract with Boeing?